My name is Sean Lowry, and I'd like to start off by saying, thank you to the essential workers and those that have been leaving their homes to keep us safe. For those on today's call that may have family and friends on the front lines, we appreciate their contributions. For today's discussion, we won't be focusing specifically on the COVID situation, but we are going to be talking about some solutions that can overcome the increasing challenges presented by the current pandemic. As I said, I'm Sean Lowry with Lowry Solutions. We are a solution provider specializing in supply chain solutions for traceability and visibility, with a particular focus on enterprise mobility and managed print services. I'm very excited to be joined by Ron Pogson today. Ron will be sharing valuable stories with us from his 30 years of experience as a logistics industry executive. But before we jump in, a couple housekeeping items. We would like to make this virtual session as engaging as possible. It is a live session. We will have the audience muted during the discussion. However, we encourage everyone to use the chat at the bottom of the screen to submit any questions along the way. Ron and I will be addressing those questions live at the end of the discussion. And again, to keep things interactive, we will be presenting a polling question to the audience and would appreciate everyone taking a moment to respond once we put that up on the screen. Lastly, it is being recorded, and the session and the recording of today's discussion will be shared with all attendees in the coming days. So, Ron, again, thank you for joining me today. Can you please share a little more about your background in the logistics?
It's a pleasure to be here today, and good afternoon to everyone on the call. A bit about myself. I've been in the transportation industry in an IT capacity for over 30 years. I came up the ranks of the application development and implementation side of IT, and for the last 15 years or so, I was the Director of Information Technology for two courier divisions of TFI International, Canpar Courier and Lewis Express. Combined, we managed over 3,500 mobile devices and delivered over 50 million packages a year.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Ron. Yep. So from an agenda perspective, today we are going to hear a bit from Ron on his background. We're also going to be talking about some of the logistics business challenges that he faced in his previous executive roles. How they went about finding solutions to overcome those challenges, and then lastly, what the overall results were. Ron, jumping into it, can you provide some context as to why you were looking at implementing a technology solution in your past roles?
Yeah, so first a little more history. My first involvement in mobile devices and track and trace software was in the early 90s. Back then, devices were heavy, DOS-based, three-line text screens with no touch capability, no cameras or GPS, not even cellular connectivity. All device communications were done in batch mode at the end of the day, and they were merely barcode scanners. So while this technology popularized the world of barcodes, it didn't eliminate signatures on paper or give any real-time updates. Then came the 2000s. iOS and Android came to market, along with all the cool apps and hardware we enjoy today, and it was quickly becoming a connected world. So newer mobile devices for couriers hit the market as well, with more bells and whistles. We adapted to that new world of handhelds the best we could by shoehorning some of those tech advances into our legacy software. Now we have the 2010s and into today, and the accelerated push for e-commerce and the B2C courier delivery market growth. The challenge for us was our legacy systems were built for the B2B market, and the cost to support and maintain these systems was increasing substantially, and upgrading was a very difficult and costly task. The B2B market built our business on mainly fixed driver routes, visiting the same customers each and every day, and delivering to the same stores and businesses. The B2C market created the need to be flexible to the ever-changing route structures to service our customers' on-demand pickup requests and support the multiple delivery options they were expecting.
Thank you for that. And I mean, certainly, I think that's kind of the point of technology, right? Is to continue to evolve with the changing dynamics in the marketplace. And I think you highlighted a lot of the different ones. So, Ron, I think one of the questions is where do you even start, right? Where does an organization or an individual begin researching like options for finding a solution for their company today? Can you share a little bit about your team's approach?
Yeah, so really a few options to look at. Um, for in-house developed solutions, the main pros of this approach is that you have full control over both your requirements and your resources. The cons, slow development time as your IT team has other tasks in their day, and slow deployment as your resources are limited. Of note too, your development team will be making enhancements to the software for years as the business continues to change and grow, and ultimately your costs will continue to grow.
Yeah, those are some good points, Ron. I think that more and more organizations are outsourcing some of their IT requirements today, and largely because they simply don't have the needed human resources to handle everything, and organizations are trying to do more with less. I imagine that you looked at what the market could offer from partnering with someone.
Yes, absolutely. Outsourcing your development is most certainly an option to look at. This option also gives you full control of your requirements. However, you're now dealing with developers that likely have never been in the transportation industry. An obvious requirement for you will turn out very different in the result. Thus, slow development and deployment remain as a con, but on top of that, the testing phase will be extremely heavy to ensure your outsourced partner got everything right. In the end, the total cost of ownership will be very expensive.
Yeah, again, I think some very valid points. And while there could be many benefits to getting a bespoke solution for your organization, many companies are looking for something more commercially available, out of the box or off the shelf. What were some of the considerations that your team had in mind when looking at existing solutions?
So SaaS, or software as a service model, some might refer to this as off-the-shelf software, was our preferred approach. You'll gain and leverage the best practices of all other couriers and users of the software. You'll have a system that can manage the ever-changing technologies of hardware, operating systems, and the ever-increasing security needs. You'll be able to leverage the software service model to deploy quickly across your organization without having to cycle devices back in for upgrades. Now, perhaps the one con to consider when looking at a SaaS model in general, while the systems are flexible and configurable to the needs of your business, there might be some small process changes required to accommodate its best use.
Good points to keep in mind, and I think we'll dig into some of that a little bit later in the conversation. But first, as I mentioned in the intro, we do have a poll question for the audience. So if Elizabeth could support us by putting that up on the screen, and everyone could take a moment to respond. Just trying to understand for those joining today, maybe at what level of adoption they are with technology. Give everybody a couple moments. And great, and here we are with the results. So yeah, a little bit, I think, as expected. Certainly, probably everyone from all sorts, right? From manual pen and paper today, all the way to having a purpose-built enterprise solution in place. So thank you all for that feedback. So Ron, if we could, talking more about the total solution. So I think we're be interested to understand, everything that your team identified as key requirements that would go into creating a solution, and you mentioned the software as a service earlier. So what beyond the software as a service is needed for a complete solution?
So when designing our full solution, a few things we needed to consider. We needed to refresh our fleet with new ruggedized handhelds with supported, secure, and upgradable operating systems. We needed to remove the IT workload and the unpredictable costs of repairs by contracting experts in supporting and maintaining our hardware. And this was not the core strength of our team. And we needed to select a secure, flexible software that can deploy quickly and easily to thousands of devices.
Ron, you mentioned there kind of quickly and easily. How long does an implementation for a project like this typically take? Can you give us some idea?
Yeah, throughout my career, I've been involved with each of the previously discussed options of systems development. One big reason for choosing a SaaS model like ShipTrack is the speed of deployment. With very little development effort, because the system is ready built, and once a system is configured to your requirements, you can roll it out to your drivers. In our case, we did entire facilities or regions at a time, covering a couple hundred drivers at each stage. Start to finish was only a few short months for 125 facilities and 3,500 devices.
Wow, that's actually very, very quick when you think about the scale and scope of that.
Yep.
And I know it can be a bit of a loaded question because, like, at the same time, on the opposite end of the spectrum, I know ShipTrack has been able to get some smaller organizations up and running in as little as 2 weeks. So I think, to your point, very quick and easy to get into the hands of drivers.
Yep.
Well, moving on, from a hardware perspective, I think everyone joining today is familiar with the couriers like FedEx and UPS, and now more than ever, Amazon. Seems like we have a daily Amazon Prime delivery at my house nowadays. And we've seen the drivers, scanning or having these devices, even maybe asking us to sign for packages. I imagine you guys used a similar technology?
We certainly did have that technology. However, as many of you probably know, delivery drivers can be very tough on handheld computers. So we needed rugged devices that could support that abuse from manufacturers that were investing heavily in these technologies. And we needed to have our repairs managed by a lifecycle services partner who could also manage our spares pool and thus maintain our service levels at a predictable cost. With thousands of drivers, we also knew that even though devices were rugged, a certain percentage were going to need repair. Trust me, it is inevitable that a device will fall off the seat of the truck or fall out of their holster to the ground, be left on a bumper of a truck, get run over, fall in a puddle, or be left out in the rain for hours. In my experience, it happens with surprising regularity. True story, a few years back, while a driver was delivering on a country route, he stopped for a bio break at a cottage outhouse. Yes, you guessed it, the device fell out of his holster and down the outhouse hole. Really not a pleasant thought. Kudos to the driver as he somehow fished it out, put the device in a Ziploc bag and shipped it back to our service provider. We, of course, warned him ahead of time. Believe it or not, that device worked as tests were done through the Ziploc bag. However, in the end, we decided to put that device out of service. My point, if you think it won't happen, it most certainly will. You should consider a 5 to 10% spare pool of devices to handle this situation.
Well, certainly glad I was not the technician waiting to receive that device. So, well, moving on from the hardware to the software technology itself. Earlier, you alluded to some of the advantages using software as a service-based technology. Can you elaborate on some of those for us?
The old challenge of premise-based software, where we were responsible for paying for maintenance agreements, the infrastructure to run it, and expensive upgrades, if the vendor was even willing to make them at all, was now in the past. Software as a service has changed the economics of how companies can leverage software to manage and grow their business.
Ron, it's interesting you mentioned economics. I've often had conversations with end users that are evaluating technology solutions. whether it be from a CapEx or an OpEx budgetary perspective. Was that true with your experience?
Absolutely true. It was part of our equation. With capital expense, you have an upfront cash outlay with the cost written off over the life of the project, typically 3 to 5 years. You'll then be confronted with a new capital expense to refresh the system at new and likely higher costs, and that cycle continues. With operating expense, you have predictable and transactional-based pay-per-use costs that can fluctuate to your business volumes. So after years of the capital cost roller coaster, we chose the OpEx approach that ShipTrack provided us.
You know, Ron, something else I always hear when talking with businesses is that, everyone believes that their business is unique and we don't do things like other companies. How were you able to customize the solution and specifically maybe the ShipTrack software to suit the needs of your organization?
One of the unique aspects of ShipTrack is their approach to service enterprise accounts. They're professional and experienced, and they customized our implementation based on how we wanted to operate our business. What I mean is their system is adaptable for many different use cases and workflows right out of the box. It was also very reassuring to know that feature enhancements and upgrades are included as part of the service. After 8 years in operation, this future-proofing approach has resulted in a very powerful tool with hundreds of features. So for our project, the ShipTrack implementation team included a project manager, a technical account manager, and training services with materials they developed specifically for our drivers. The driver app only takes about 10 minutes to learn, and ShipTrack also customized some of the training aids for us, like visor cards, PDF documentation, and videos.
Oh, that's great. Well, probably handy resources to help get adopted to. Ron, there's clearly a lot of moving parts and detailed work to be done to deploy a solution like we're discussing. Your organization chose either not to handle, or you didn't have the bandwidth and the resources to handle directly yourself.
We were a courier company, not an IT firm. With thousands of devices in the field, limited IT budgets and resources, it was critical for us to use the resources we had where they were needed most. So by outsourcing our software, we needed to feel comfortable that our support services firm and our successful software vendor would be working together as a team.
And Ryan, in your experience, so when working with various support services firms, can you shed some light on what types of services, like what are examples of some of the things that they would be providing to you?
Yeah. So we were able to contract with a lifecycle services firm that was able to deliver a customized package of services that included deployment and kitting of the devices, gold image management, spares management, repair management, and ongoing user support. If a driver needed a replacement unit, a fully configured and tested device was waiting on site or delivered. Spares inventory were all managed by our provider. This service portion is critical to ensure your drivers remain productive, as moving back to a paper-based system is not an acceptable backup plan. And for ShipTrack, they already had processes in place to support our users directly post-implementation. They also worked closely with our hardware support team during the pre-deployment phase in configuring and testing our devices with the software to ensure they were 100% functional and ready to go.
Sounds very much like a real team approach. So excellent. Well, Ron, I want to be cognizant of time so that we can make sure we get to some of the questions that we've received from the audience along the way. But before we get to the Q&A, can you briefly summarize the success you achieved with the overall project?
Yeah, so as I shared previously on our business challenges slide, we needed to become more flexible, adaptable, and manage our expenses. Referencing this slide, our bottom line was positively impacted by improved efficiencies resulting from automating many of our operational processes. We were able to substantially free up our internal IT resources by outsourcing device management and repair. The configurability of the software meant we were able to service both B2B and B2C customers who appreciated the increased visibility they had on their deliveries. And finally, something I hadn't mentioned yet, I had real-time performance data. So no more guesswork for our operations management or phone calls to drivers to find out where they were and how much work they had left in their day. All these results were proof that our investment was indeed paying off.
Great, and congratulations on all the success from the deployment. So great. Well, as I mentioned, we did receive some questions along the way, Ron. So why don't we jump over to that? So Ron, question here is, does the solution work with cell phones, or do you need to have the industrial mobile devices like we discussed?
So for our implementation, it was mainly focused on the ruggedized handheld devices. However, we had a small portion of agent drivers that delivered in sort of the lower volume and sparsely populated parts of the country. In these cases, the agents were using their own smartphone, utilizing the camera to scan barcodes. The system works perfectly well on these devices, both iOS and Android.
Okay. Yeah, and Ron, as I mentioned, Lowry Solutions, a provider of enterprise mobility. What we find too is that when you really break down the total cost of ownership around industrial devices, while the initial investment might seem more, just that extended life cycle, and then the ability that these devices are out in the field, not back for constant ongoing repairs, proves to be a more beneficial total cost of ownership. So yep. Another question, Ron, I believe you had mentioned it, but can you remind us, how big was the deployment you worked on? Like how many drivers was it roughly?
The drivers, it was about 2,000. In total, we had about 3,500 devices because we had some in-facility devices as well. And that was across 125 facilities.
Okay, well. A follow-up question, Ron, on the hardware side. So did you purchase warranties with the hardware?
For our rugged devices, yes, we did. The manufacturers have full comprehensive warranty options for your units. So even when they do break, like the examples I mentioned earlier, usually just after a few years of wear and tear, they do get repaired at no additional cost, and our device service provider managed that repair process for us.
I'm sure they weren't anticipating the outhouse incident, but good to know that it is still covered. So great. One of the questions is they're interested to know a little more about choosing like the OpEx funding approach. I think maybe if those are a little unfamiliar, I mean, the fact that the software is a subscription model, could you maybe comment on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, the software is definitely a subscription model. It's you can talk to the ShipTrack folks for pricing, but it's based on volume of shipments.
Okay, great. A little more of a technical question here, Ron. Does the solution work to capture signatures?
Absolutely. The signature is captured on the touch screen of the device. At the same time, it also captures the GPS location of the delivery event for further proof of delivery. But note that that is completely configurable. Many couriers are not obtaining signatures today with the current pandemic conditions, as they don't want to have people handling their device. So the software can be fully configured with options to accept a photo instead of the drop-off area for these cases.
Makes sense. I think I've experienced that with some grocery deliveries more recently. So excellent. The $1 million question here, right? Someone is asking, how much does it cost? So Ron, I can address that. Again, as you mentioned, the software as a service model enables it to be very cost effective and scale for organizations. ShipTrack software does start at $625 a month and can support low number of drivers all the way up to some of the very largest enterprises like Ron's example. Let's see if there's any other last questions coming in. Okay, I think that's about it for questions. I guess lastly, how can I go about seeing the software and getting more information? So, well, yes, certainly would, for anyone on today's call, welcome the opportunity to provide a demo or some additional information. Please feel free to visit Lowry Solution or ShipTrack's website. Phone numbers are listed to call or email us to schedule a demo of the solution and or follow up on any specific use cases or requirements that you may have. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your afternoon today to join us. Ron, very special thank you. Appreciate you sharing some time with me and providing us a little bit of background from your experience. So, wish you the best. Everyone stay healthy and happy. And we will talk to everyone again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.